In the summer heat of 1190, one of the most powerful men in Europe stood before a river in Anatolia. His name was Frederick I Barbarossa, Red-Beard, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, ruler of German princes, challenger of popes, enemy of rebellious Italian cities, and one of the most feared monarchs of the Middle Ages. He had spent his life trying to prove one thing. An emperor was not just another king. An emperor stood above kings. But now, far from Germany, far from Italy, far from the courts and battlefields where he had built his legend, Barbarossa faced something no army could defeat: a cold, fast river. And within moments, the dream of a united Christian empire marching to Jerusalem would be broken, not by a sword, not by betrayal, not by an enemy army, but by water. Frederick Barbarossa was born around 1122, into a world where power was never simple. Germany was not a single strong kingdom in the modern sense. It was a collection of duchies, bishops, nobles, cities and rival families, each pulling in a different direction. The emperor's title sounded enormous, but the reality was harder. A Holy Roman Emperor had to control proud German princes, negotiate with the Church, claim authority in Italy, and still appear as the defender of Christendom. Frederick understood this better than most. When he became King of Germany in 1152, he inherited a divided realm. His first great decision was not to crush every rival immediately. Instead, he tried to balance the great noble families against each other. His goal was clear: restore imperial authority. He believed the empire had weakened because emperors had allowed princes, cities and popes to forget their place. Barbarossa wanted to remind them. At first, he moved with intelligence. He made peace with powerful nobles. He rewarded loyalty. He used marriage alliances. He presented himself as a ruler of order, law, and dignity. But ambition always has a price. And Barbarossa's ambition pointed south, toward Italy. Northern Italy was rich, urban, and proud. Cities like Milan, Cremona, Pavia, and Verona were not weak towns waiting for commands. They were wealthy communes with their own armies, walls, merchants, and political traditions. To Frederick, these cities belonged under imperial authority. To the cities, Frederick was a distant German ruler trying to control their freedom. This became one of the central conflicts of his reign. Barbarossa crossed the Alps again and again, determined to prove that imperial law still mattered in Italy. His opponents were not only soldiers. They were city councils, local nobles, bishops, merchants, and eventually the Pope himself. One of his greatest enemies became Milan. Milan resisted imperial control and challenged Frederick's authority openly. Barbarossa could not allow that. If Milan stood defiant, other cities would follow. So he made an example of it. After long conflict, Milan was forced to surrender in 1162. Frederick ordered the city destroyed as a warning to all who opposed him. It was a brutal political message. The emperor could still punish rebellion. For a moment it seemed to work. But fear is not the same as loyalty. The destruction of Milan did not end resistance. It helped create something more dangerous: unity among Frederick's enemies. The Italian cities formed the Lombard League, a coalition designed to resist imperial domination. This was one of Barbarossa's biggest political challenges. He was not fighting one city anymore. He was fighting a network of cities that understood that survival depended on cooperation. The papacy also became involved. Frederick's relationship with the popes was complicated and often hostile. He believed the emperor had a sacred role, but the popes believed spiritual authority could not be controlled by imperial power. The conflict became a struggle over who had the higher authority in Christian Europe: the emperor with his armies, or the pope with the church behind him. Frederick supported rival papal claimants at times, trying to shape church politics in his favor. But this strategy created deeper enemies and damaged his moral position. His greatest Italian defeat came at the Battle of Legnano in 1176. There, the Lombard League faced the imperial army. Frederick expected disciplined imperial strength to break the city militias. But the Italians fought with determination. Their defense held. The emperor's forces were defeated, and for a time Barbarossa himself was believed dead. He survived. But his dream of absolute control over northern Italy did not. The defeat forced him into negotiation. In 1177, he reconciled with Pope Alexander III at Venice. Later, the Peace of Constance in 1183 gave the Lombard cities significant self-government while still recognizing imperial authority in name. This was not complete humiliation. Barbarossa was too skilled for that. But it was a lesson. He had learned that even an emperor could not rule everywhere by force. Back in Germany, Frederick faced another dangerous rival: Henry the Lion, Duke of Saxony and Bavaria. Henry was one of the most powerful nobles in the empire. At first he was useful to Frederick. But as Henry's power grew, he became a threat. The relationship broke down when Henry refused to support Frederick's Italian campaign. For Barbarossa, this was not just a personal insult. It was a political danger. If a duke could ignore the emperor during a major campaign, imperial authority would collapse. So Frederick acted. Henry the Lion was placed on trial, stripped of his duchies and forced into exile. This was one of Barbarossa's most important domestic victories. By breaking Henry's power, Frederick showed the German princes that even the strongest noble could fall if he challenged the emperor too openly. But again there was a cost. Germany remained decentralized. Frederick could punish rebels, but he could not turn the empire into a fully centralized monarchy. His rule depended on negotiation, loyalty, pressure, and prestige. And prestige mattered more than anything. That is why the final great decision of his life was so important. The Crusade. In 1187, Jerusalem fell to Saladin, the great Muslim ruler who had united Egypt and Syria and defeated the Crusader army at the Battle of Hattin. The news shook Christian Europe. Jerusalem was not just a city. It was a symbol. Its loss demanded a response. 3 great rulers took the cross for what became the Third Crusade. Frederick Barbarossa, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Richard I of England, later known as Richard the Lionheart. Philip II of France, a careful and calculating king. Frederick was the oldest of the 3, but in many ways he was the most experienced. He had ruled for decades. He had fought rebels, cities, nobles and political enemies. He had marched armies across the Alps. He had survived defeat and returned stronger. For Barbarossa, the crusade was more than religious duty. It was a final chance to crown his life with glory. If he could lead a massive imperial army to the Holy Land and help recover Jerusalem, his reputation would rise beyond every king in Europe. His decision made sense politically too. A crusade could unite his nobles behind a sacred cause. It could strengthen his image as defender of Christendom. It could place him above Richard and Philip, not merely as another crusader king but as emperor. So he gathered one of the largest crusading armies of the age and marched east by land. This was a bold choice. The sea route was dangerous but faster. The land route was long, exhausting, and full of political risks. Barbarossa had to pass through Hungary, Byzantine territory, and Anatolia before even reaching the main Crusader front. But Frederick believed discipline could overcome distance. And at first it seemed he was right. The imperial army moved with order and strength. Barbarossa negotiated passage through kingdoms and territories. Relations with the Byzantine Empire were tense, because Byzantium feared large Western armies moving through its lands. The Byzantine Emperor Isaac II Angelos worried that Frederick's army might become a threat to Constantinople itself. The 2 emperors did not trust each other. Frederick saw Byzantine hesitation as suspicious and insulting. Isaac saw Frederick's army as dangerous and unpredictable. There were delays, tensions, and accusations. But Barbarossa pressed forward. He crossed into Anatolia where the army faced hunger, heat, difficult terrain, and attacks from Turkish forces. Yet even there Barbarossa's experience showed. At the Battle of Iconium in 1190, his army fought against the forces of the Sultanate of Rum. The Crusaders captured the city, gaining supplies and proving that the old emperor still had military power. This was a major success. After years of political struggle in Europe, Frederick Barbarossa seemed close to achieving the final triumph of his life. He had survived Italy. He had humbled Henry the Lion. He had crossed hostile lands. He had defeated enemies in Anatolia. The road to the Holy Land was opening. Then came the river. On June 10, 1190, Frederick Barbarossa reached the Saleph River in southern Anatolia. The exact details of what happened are debated. Some accounts say he tried to swim across. Others say he fell from his horse while crossing. Some suggest the cold water shocked his aging body. What is certain is this: Frederick Barbarossa drowned. The emperor who had fought cities, popes, dukes, and armies died not in a glorious battlefield charge, but in a sudden accident. His death severely weakened the crusading army. Medieval armies depended heavily on personal leadership. Barbarossa was not just a commander. He was the symbol holding the entire expedition together. Without him, morale declined sharply. Many German crusaders turned back. Others continued under his son, Frederick of Swabia, but disease, exhaustion, and despair weakened them. The great imperial force that might have changed the balance of the Third Crusade never arrived in full strength. This was one of the great turning points of the crusade. Richard the Lionheart and Philip II would still reach the Holy Land. Richard would win famous victories and negotiate with Saladin. But Jerusalem would not be retaken. The death of Barbarossa removed the largest land army from the crusading effort before it could fully join the struggle. One accident changed the political and military future of the campaign. Frederick Barbarossa's life was a story of enormous ambition. He wanted to restore imperial power in Germany. He wanted to dominate northern Italy. He wanted to control rebellious nobles. He wanted to stand as the defender of Christian Europe. And finally, he wanted to march east and help reclaim Jerusalem. Some of his decisions succeeded. He stabilized parts of Germany. He defeated Henry the Lion. He strengthened imperial prestige. He became one of the most respected rulers of his age. But some of his ambitions failed. He could not permanently crush the Italian communes. He could not fully dominate the papacy. He could not turn the Holy Roman Empire into a centralized state. And he never reached Jerusalem. His enemies were many. The Lombard cities, Pope Alexander III, Henry the Lion, Byzantine suspicion, Turkish forces in Anatolia, and finally the unpredictable danger of the journey itself. Barbarossa was not a foolish ruler. He was intelligent, disciplined, charismatic, and relentless. But his life shows a brutal truth about medieval power. A ruler could win battles, break rivals, and command thousands, but still lose everything to distance, politics, weather, illness, or one fatal moment. That is why his ending became legendary. The emperor who tried to bend Europe to his will did not fall to another emperor. He did not fall to a pope. He did not fall to a rebel city. He drowned on crusade, just as his greatest dreams seemed within reach. And after his death, legends grew around him. In German tradition, some believed Barbarossa was not truly gone. They imagined him sleeping inside a mountain, waiting for the moment when Germany would need him again. It was a myth built from disappointment and memory. Because Frederick Barbarossa had been more than a king. He was the image of imperial ambition itself, powerful, red-bearded, unstoppable in life. Until the river stopped him.